In this state, the body really isn't paintable yet. The CNC machine doesn't necessarily make smooth cuts. So there are various aspects of the body that I'm going to need to smooth out. What I'm doing right now, though, is evening out the thickness of the epoxy. The epoxy is self-leveling, but one thing I forgot to do when I poured the epoxy onto the body blank is level the body blank. I should have used shims underneath to get the body level so that the epoxy would self-level and be the same thickness across the body. So I had to bring the epoxy thickness on that bottom left corner down so that it was even with the rest of the guitar. Otherwise, I feared it was going to look kind of weird. I noticed as I was sanding the body that there were various kind of nicks and scratches and dings and dents that I wanted to fill so that I could get a nice smooth surface to paint. So I'm just using a wood filler. It's a really very easy to use wood filler, almost like thick paint. And I just use a putty knife to kind of spread it across the body evenly. I put it on pretty thick and then I scrape it away as best I can. It dries really fast, although I do give it overnight just to be sure that it's as dry as possible. And then it can very easily be sanded away with a random orbital sander or even hand sanded if you didn't have one of those. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm using the random orbital sander, just going back over the wood-filled body and basically bringing it down to wood again, so that the only filler left is the filler that's filling the holes and dents and scratches. I also filled the sides of the guitar. That's where the CNC machine leaves the most uneven finish. So I sanded all that back and then used some wood filler to really kind of flatten it all out. And now I'm doing the detail work. Where the epoxy meets the fabric, or the fabric meets the wood, the fabric can kind of sometimes stick out. And I'm trying to get the fabric to be smooth, even with the level of the epoxy and the level of the wood, so that there's a smooth transition between those three substances, and so that you can't see it once everything is painted. So that's some of the detail work I was doing by hand. Here I'm just taking some of the wood filler off that went off into the neck cavity. And now I'm doing the round over. This is a brand new palm router that I purchased. I like it so much better than the full-sized router. I just feel like I can control it better. I'm using a, I believe, 3/8 inch round over bit. It cuts through the epoxy like butter. So I do this to the top, and then you'll see I'll flip it and I'll do the same round over the edges on the bottom or back. now I'm using the random orbital sander. I also did some hand sanding as well, just to smooth out that round over. Again, the transition from epoxy to fabric and fabric to wood is a problem area, and it needs a little bit more care in terms of smoothing out. So I believe I'm using 400 grit sandpaper. One thing I forgot to mention before is I use a no-load grit because sanding epoxy, the resin particles get caught up in regular sandpaper and it becomes ineffective and or leaves scratch marks. So the no-load sandpaper is really the way to go if you're sanding epoxy. This is where I'm doing more of that detail work, the transition from epoxy to fabric and fabric to wood. Feeling for any ridges. If there's a ridge between the wood and the fabric, it means the fabric is sticking out a little bit. So I try to sand it back so that it's smooth. I recently made a vow to myself that I would drill all necessary holes in the guitar before doing any kind of finish work, because doing it in the opposite order has bitten me in the past. So what I did here was I took this StewMac Telecaster template, and luckily it lined up perfectly with the pickup cavities, and I lined it up with the center line, and I used it to locate the position of the bridge. So I just used it to drill the bridge screw holes and the string through body holes. And that's what you see me doing here. Eventually, and I did not get this on video, I use a template to finish cutting the holes for the string ferrules that go into the back of the guitar. This is historically my least favorite part of guitar building. I don't know why. Cutting the hole for the jack, it just takes so long. You have to use so much pressure. The bit gets smoking hot. But eventually I'm able to get it done. As you can kind of see here, I have masked the entire top of the guitar with blue tape. I tried to do a really good job of masking the edges too, and I'm currently priming, and then I go on to paint all of the exposed wood white. So I'm using a white primer here. This is Rust-Oleum 2X primer, and then I don't show it, but I also go in and do a 2X white paint over the primer.